From each happily ever after, every wish upon a star. Let's break down the movies that shaped who we are. From memory lane to now and everything in between. The most famous of films to the ones we've never seen. Decade by decade, all the times we laughed and cried. And with a little pixie dust, they will all take flight. Reliving the feelings, and we're trying our very best. And if they mean the same to you, please be our guest. So hop aboard, we would love to have you as we hang with a certain mouth, the whole gang too. If you love nostalgia stuff, we hope this does the trick. Thanks for joining us as we dive the magic.
Hi, and welcome back to the Deep Diving the Magic podcast. I'm KJ.
And I'm Jeffrey. And today we have quite the episode for you. And you know how you can tell it's going to be a great episode? Because today the mug matches the movie. We are going to be diving into the 18th Disney feature-length film, a movie that I love, a movie from July 28th, 1951, Alice in Wonderland. So I will say this before we get started. Buckle up because there's a lot of notes coming because we love this movie. There's a lot of nostalgia, a lot of love for it now. And while we were watching this, we had to pause it multiple times to catch up with all the notes for the memorable moments that we were taking.
Yeah.
That doesn't normally happen. So, but before we do start diving into all the wonderfulness of the Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland, let's go ahead and throw it over to you, KJ, for the synopsis and some history facts.
All right, so IMDb synopsis says Alice stumbles into a world of Wonderland. Will she get home? Not if the Queen of Hearts has her way.
A whole lot more involved than that.
There is a. I didn't think this was a great synopsis, to be honest, but
That's a great movie.
It is a great movie.
So go ahead with some history for us.
So some history. So Walt Disney released his version of Alice in the 1950s. Obviously, that's what we're going over now. It was not his first inspiration from the Lewis Carroll novels. He already had done one in the 1920s where he had created the Alice comedies, which I had no idea that was a thing. It was a series that involved live action of a little girl named Alice and an animated cat named Julius, and they had adventures in an animated landscape. The series lasted from 1923 to 1927 for a total of 57 films. A decade later, Mickey Mouse went to Wonderland in Through the Mirror in the 1936. So it wasn't the first.
No, I actually saw that in the 30s Walt wanted to make a animated Alice in Wonderland movie.
Yep.
But it was scrapped for Snow White. So,
well, I guess that's okay. So the movie actually took 5 years to complete, but it was in development for over 10 years before it entered active production. It costed around $3 million to make. And this was due to the full-length live action that was shot.
That makes sense.
On July 28th, 1951, like you said, it was released in theaters after probably what felt like the people that were doing it forever. It probably felt like, I don't know. We were just talking about, like, I've been here for 10 years now.
Yeah, time goes by.
So could you imagine, like, during this time we'd been working on one movie the entire time?
I mean, they knocked it out of the park, so.
Yeah. Anyway, another thing that I found was, so Alice's Adventure in Wonderland actually was not a successful movie in the box office. It was noted as a failure. However, it did become like a cult film favorite in the 1960s, where it was viewed as a head film. Several years later, it became the Disney Studio's most requested 16mm film rental title for colleges and private individuals. In 1974, the studio took note of this fact, withdrew the rental prints, and reissued the film nationally themselves.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't make their money off of it in the beginning, so.
Oh, they've made their money off of it.
Well, good. They definitely have now, for sure. And another thing that I thought that was interesting when I was looking into it was, um, the film actually received a lot of negativity from Lewis Carroll fans, British film and literacy critics, who accused Disney of Americanizing a great work of English literature.
But it's so good.
You're American.
I mean, I love it. I've always loved it. I loved it as a child. I love it now. Some notes that I found before we do dive in. It was shown on one of the first episode of Walt's Disneyland television series. They did show it there. The voice of Alice is also the same voice of Wendy from Peter Pan.
I saw that.
This movie is rumored to have more characters than any other Disney animated movie, which makes total
I
sense
did
because
see
there
that.
is so many characters in this movie.
Going back to the person that does the voice for Alice, did you also see that when they were filming this, when she would be recording, she would actually dress like Alice to get in
No,
character?
I did not see that, but
So she actually wore the Alice getup
I
while
mean,
she was recording this, which I thought was really cool.
did she wear the Wendy get? I guess we'll get there on that.
I don't know if
But
she
yeah,
did wear the
there
Wendy
is
getup, but she did.
so
Yes.
many characters in this. Speaking of characters, the doorknob is the only character in the film to not appear in the book. So the doorknob is not in the book.
I did see that.
And then I know that we like to touch on this on other movies, so we'll touch on it here.
Mhm.
There is representation in the Disney parks of this ride or of this movie. There is a ride at Disneyland, but there is also the teacup ride in the Disney parks, which I will touch on later. And then the Cheshire Cafe, which is right by the Cheshire Cafe
Yes,
that we
can-
always stop at.
You
So
can always get a nice, well, you have to go there earlier because it closes early before anything else in the parks. I'm pretty sure they told us because of the fireworks. So I think they actually have to spray the top of it down
Yeah,
before the
it's
fireworks.
right there.
But if you're in the parks, definitely go get you a Cheshire cattail.
It's good.
Tasty.
It's sweet. Yeah.
A tasty little chocolate treat.
Oh, he's a tasty little cat, I guess. So were you ready to jump into the movie?
Sure.
So it does start off with the RKO credits. There is the army of playing cards.
Mhm.
There's also it's followed by a lot of beautiful credits that kind of have like a hand-drawn esque like characters from the movie with a bunch of vibrant colors. The opening song does ask, "Where is the path to Wonderland?" Kind of kicking everything off right there. It opens with our lovely girl Alice, who is daydreaming and not listening to her teacher read. She's teaching a history lesson, but she's in a
Yeah.
tree. So who teaches a history lesson in a tree?
So I felt like it opened up with some very colorful, trippy drawings of the movie's characters before it actually opened up to the
Yeah,
tree.
so that was in the credits that I was saying, yeah.
Yeah, and there was a song singing in the background saying, "How do you get to Wonderland?"
Where's the path to Wonderland?
Yeah.
So we do meet Alice. She is in the tree. She's not paying attention to her teacher who's getting irritated. I mean, that's talk about a one-on-one tutor. She's the only kid in the class and she's hanging out in a tree. We meet Dinah the cat. Dinah the cat is not one of the snooty cats that we've pointed out so far in Disney. Dinah the cat is just a cat.
Pretty laid back.
Cute little cat. Alice isn't paying attention and her teacher isn't happy. So Alice says, in her world, every book will be nothing but pictures. Because how could you like a book without pictures? So in her world, every book will be nothing but pictures. And if Alice had a world of her own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is, and everything would be what it isn't. So a perfect little segue there. It breaks into a song about a world of Alice's own, where she's laying in a flower patch and blatantly ignoring the teacher.
Yep.
And the song itself does say that her world would be a wonderland. So that's a good. It sets it up really well. Not all Disney movies do a great job at setting things up from the beginning that we've seen so far, but this kind of sets up the whole entire premise. Speaking of the premise, and a very reoccurring thing in the movie is right after she finishes that song, she's kind of staring into her reflection in the brook, and we see the White Rabbit with his Suco umbrella, watch, and clearly somewhere to be.
running late.
Yeah, anything you want to say about the White Rabbit and where he has to be before we dive into it?
So the White Rabbit shows up running late, and then Alice follows him due to her curiosity, and then she ends up following him, kind of into a cave, which,
Kind of like a rabbit hole, yeah.
yeah, and so then she like falls down a hole inside this rabbit hole, um, which leads her to Wonderland. But
But
I thought it was interesting because as she's falling, she's not like freaking out or screaming or anything like I feel like everybody else would be.
yeah,
She's just like, oh. And then she like waves to Dinah and
yeah,
and Dinah just looks over and like waves back to her and I'm just like,
so
what?
some quotes that I wrote down from that whole sequence. She does ask, what could a rabbit be late for? And the rabbit says, no time to say, go goodbye, hello. I'm late, I'm late, I'm late.
Yeah.
Alice then, like,
It's a very Jeffrey saying.
Yeah.
I feel like you're always in a hurry for something.
Yeah, I'm a busy guy. Alice does crawl into the hole, like you said, to see where the he is going so fast, even though she does say that they're not invited and that curiosity often leads to trouble. That is another quote that
Yes.
she says, curiosity often leads to trouble.
And I also thought it was funny, going back a little bit, you know, where like she said like if it was her world, like how things would be. She specifically referenced cats and rabbits. Did you notice that? And
Cats
then
and rabbits. Well,
and then
reside
the
in
next
fancy little
there's a rabbit.
Yep. Well, curiosity often leads to trouble. So she falls down. Her
True.
dress becomes the parachute. But on the way down, she's not nervous, like you said. She does pass floating lamps, mirrors, books, clocks, a rocking chair, and everything keeps changing colors. Um, and on her way down, she does see a map, and she asks, "What if people walked upside down on the other side of the world?" So, she gets to the bottom, and she comes to a door, and she opens the door to try to see where the rabbit went. But behind each door is another door, and it's curiouser and curiouser and curiouser
Doors.
Yep. Each door is a little bit smaller. So then we meet the doorknob I referenced earlier, who loves his good old turn dad joke. I think this might be the first depiction of a dad joke, because the door loves the good old turn dad joke. And then he says, "It's simply impassable because nothing is impossible." How does that quote make you feel? Simply impassable because nothing is impossible.
I thought he said nothing is impossible. It's impassable.
Nope. It's simply impassable because nothing is impossible.
Okay.
Something you're going to hear me say a lot about this is I love like the lyrical writing of everything. Everything kind of rhymes. Everything flows. It's very me.
It's very Jeffrey.
So then she realizes she's too big. So the doorknob says you have to drink the bottle on the table to shrink down. So
what's in this bottle?
Okay, perfect segue. I would say, would you drink that bottle that says drinking?
First of all, there's a doorknob talking to you.
Yeah, and you're not even nervous.
Something's wrong with Alice.
So please email us and tell me if you would drink from the bottle on the table.
And did you happen to catch when she drank it and she was describing the flavor of it? Did you listen to what she said?
I didn't write it down, but
I specifically wrote it down because I was like, what? So when she drinks the potion that's in the bottle, it says drink me. She said it tastes like cherry tart.
Oh yeah, she does say that.
And then she goes, oh, pineapple. And and then she goes, and roast turkey. And I was just like,
very, very Willy Wonka. So
and then she shrinks down.
After all that stress of shrinking down, the door is locked. Because of course it is.
Yeah, she forgot the key.
The key's on the tables, the door is locked. So but then of course there's some cookies there that
I wasn't sure what they were. I had in my notes candy or crackers.
Yeah, I think they're cookies.
They say eat me.
Yeah, a lot like we're gonna dive into a lot of things that get eaten later that are mushrooms, but these were cookies.
Yeah.
So she goes back up to get the key into a giant, but then
she starts crying.
She floods the room with her giant tears.
Would make Justin Timberlake very proud because she like cried a river, and then the river turned into like an ocean.
Yeah, I actually so she floods the room. I actually wrote that Now we know where all the rain came from that was going into the ship in Treasure Island because there was so much water. So she
It
shrinks back
probably
down.
was from all the other Disney movies.
She
too.
shrinks back down, and she rides the bottle through the doorknob's mouth because the door was locked.
Mhm.
So then we get into Wonderland, and we're in the water first, and we meet one of my favorite characters, which is the sailor dodo bird with a pipe floating on a bird being pushed by a different bird.
I have to say, I wrote this down. I do not remember that scene
Oh, it's my
at
favorite.
all.
It's my second favorite scene of the
But
movie. It's my favorite character.
I have to say, like as a child, like certain things made me very, very anxious. So maybe I just kind of blocked out the entire beginning because I feel like the falling down the rabbit hole and all of that would have
I love it.
had me super anxious.
So our bird friend sings that he never ever ever does a thing about the weather because the weather never does a thing for him. Well, for me.
Mhm.
And he's floating there. So there's some crabs going by doing the backstroke.
Mhm.
So then we get
I
onto
thought
the
it looked more like lobsters.
yeah, okay, maybe it's lobsters. Going by
I
doing
thought they
the
were long.
doing the backstroke. Then we get kind of beached onto a shore, and there's a lot of birds dancing in a circle to dry off.
Mhm.
And they say, if there's never a beginning, there will never be a stop.
Mhm.
Um, so as she's drying off with all these birds who keep changing directions on her,
Mhm.
she sees the white rabbit run by. But believe it or not, he's late for something, so he's on his way. He's not staying there. He's not sticking around. Um, So this brings her into a forest where we meet the Tweedles. The Tweedles, Tweedledee, Tweedledum. They teach her manners in their own little way. Anything to say on the Tweedles? Thoughts on them? You remember them from your childhood?
Um, I I do, but I think I just remember the reference. They're super, super rare to see at the park,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to say I think we saw them maybe like at a Christmas party once. So if you go to a Christmas party, you're more likely to see Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Um, but they are very interesting little people. They're not really little, but I thought it was interesting because she calls them curious little figures.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Our uh, our friend's wife and her friend dressed as Tweedledee and Tweedledum for Christmas. I'm sorry, for Halloween a few years ago, and they had the blow up costumes and everything. Um, so they are teaching manners in their own little way, and they're kind of telling stories. So the first
Mhm.
story they tell is my favorite scene of the entire movie, and that is the walrus and the carpenter.
Mhm.
I have a lot of notes about the walrus and the carpenter.
The curious oysters.
Yep, and the story of the curious oysters. Anything to say
Mhm.
about this before I kind of touch on the story here?
Um, I don't really know what you're going to say about it, so.
Okay. So the Tweedles are telling the story, which kind of brings us to
Mhm.
the animated part of the story comes to life.
Yep.
And as a dapper dressed a dapper dressed walrus and a carpenter, they're walking along the beach.
Mhm.
The carpenter stumbles across a family of oysters,
Mhm.
like a mother and a bunch of children.
Mhm.
The walrus convinces the oysters to come out with them because it's a pleasant day for a walk.
Mhm.
And everything is poetic, like I said.
But
And
the mother oyster tells them no. They
yep.
need to stay in their beds.
Hmm.
That's the only thing I was really going to say was she tells them no. She points to the calendar and tells them it's not a good time to go out and that she recommends that they stay in their bed. And she points over to the clock, or not the clock, the calendar, and it's March in the calendar. And if you look at it, the R in March starts to turn red.
Keep
And
blinking, right?
yeah, and it gets bigger. I think it gets bigger and turns red and starts blinking. But apparently that was to reference that in, I guess, back in that time, the summer months in England, obviously May, June, July, and August don't have R's in them. So it was a thing that wasn't recommended to eat oysters or seafood like that because they didn't really have the refrigeration to keep everything better. And it was hotter months, so you didn't really eat seafood and stuff like that unless it was a month that had an R in it.
Really?
Which I thought was interesting. So
I love seafood.
that's what the R reference is.
I love seafood. I'm a big fan, but this place that we all hang out at, this place, the local place where all of our friends hang out at, They have like oyster specials, and I was like, that's kind of strange. But so they go for a walk because it's a lovely day for a walk with these oysters, and they bring them into like they kind of like take like a shipwreck and turn it into like a little like restaurant type shack, and they kind of convince the oysters that they're all going to go out to eat, even though the sign clearly says today's special is oysters in a half shell. The carpenter, the walrus convinces the carpenter that they need some bread, so the carpenter goes to into the kitchen, which is just perfectly there, even though they just built the place to prepare some stuff.
Yeah.
But when the carpenter comes back, the walrus ate all the oysters. He's like cleaning his mouth as he's apologizing. And that's that story.
Should listen to your mom, stayed in
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah, that's true. So then the Tweedles start telling another story with about Father William, but Alice does escape the Tweedles. She does then stumble across a house, which appears to be the White Rabbit's house. And the White Rabbit is there, so maybe he's not currently late, and he's trying to find somebody named Marianne. He's very adamant about somebody named Marianne, who he then starts to believe that Alice is. He starts to believe that Alice is Marianne, and he convinces her to go get his gloves because, believe it or not, he's late. He's got to be somewhere. So Alice goes into the house to get the gloves, but what does she do? She eats mushrooms because, of course, you do. And she begins to grow into a giant because whoever learns the first time, you know what I mean? So she grows into a giant. Her arms and legs grow out of the house, so she kind of becomes like a house monster. Anything to say about this before I keep chatting?
I thought it was funny because they kept saying, I've got to get the monster out of the house. At one point, someone wanted to burn the monster out of the house, and he's like, no.
Yeah, so I was gonna touch on that.
Gonna burn his house down.
So around this time, their solution is that they're gonna pull this monster out of the chimney, and right on cue,
She kept saying, I'm not a monster.
a very dapper dressed chimney sweep lizard walks by with a ladder. So of course, we learn his name is Bill. And the reason that we learn his name is Bill is because she sneezes and sends the lizard flying out the chimney, and then I'll say, "Poor Bill," which I thought was a cute little scene where they say, "Poor Bill." Then they decide, very much to the displeasure of the White Rabbit, to burn the house down and smoke the monster out. Smoking the monster out. That's a good song. But then Alice steals a carrot from the garden and shrinks back down to a much, much, much smaller version of herself. Which then saves the house. But then suddenly the rabbit remembers that he is late, and the shrunken Alice escapes to chase after him. You know where we go to next?
The tea party, I think.
Not quite.
No.
So then we go into the woods, and in the woods we meet a bread and butterfly, a rocking horsefly, and dog and cat caterpillars, which I thought was cute. And then we meet a bunch of flowers, and these flowers have very realistic faces, and they can talk if there's anyone worth talking to or about, clearly. Speaking of our dog and caterpillar, we have a little guest right here. So the flowers love to talk, and they're kind of the catty characters of the film, but they do sing Golden Afternoon. And Golden Afternoon does teach us that it is the month of June. So why was Alice in school in the beginning?
Year-round tutoring.
Year-round tutoring.
Or she was about to fail because she wouldn't pay attention.
Yeah. So we just our house is a wonderland here. So they sing Golden Afternoon, which is kind of a famous song from the movie. And then the flowers wonder what kind of garden Alice is from.
Oh, yeah, they did ask her what kind of garden you're from.
They ask her, what kind of genus she is. And then they begin to think or suppose that she could be a wildflower. Because they have never seen her kind before, but the little flower thinks she's pretty. I think she's pretty, they say. But then they decide very bluntly that she's a weed, and they don't want no weeds in their bed. What do you think of that?
I didn't really have much thought on it, obviously.
So they splash her with water and she floats away. So then after we get past that, we are introduced to the very trippy but yet very much alphabet inspired hookah smoking caterpillar.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the caterpillar?
I feel like he is one of the more prominent characters that people think of when they think of the movie.
Yeah, he is very much obsessed with the alphabet. I want to know what this actual speaking caterpillar thinks of the dog in Caterpillar from the previous scene. Is he annoyed?
Maybe
So
that's his pets.
the I'll tell you what he does really want to know, and that is who is Alice by asking who are you over and over again, and the letters come out of his mouth as he talks of his smoke. And Alice cannot explain herself because she is not herself, it says. He then tells her to recite and then she begins to think that it's the poem that the teacher was teaching her in the beginning. But the caterpillar corrects her with a little poem about a crocodile instead, which will come back later.
Mm-hmm.
He then tells her to keep her temper, but he does a really bad job at keeping his own temper, even though he keeps telling her to keep her temper. He then becomes a very angry butterfly and tells her that one side of the mushroom makes her grow taller and one side of the mushroom makes her grow smaller, which she is conveniently sitting on a mushroom.
Mm-hmm.
She grows into another giant, and then there's a bird that thinks she's a serpent, trying to steal her eggs.
Mm-hmm.
What if serpents were that big? What would you do? Would you ever leave the house?
No.
No. Anything you have about these scenes here, or?
Nope.
All right. So then she shrinks back very small. And then she just licks the mushroom and goes back to normal height. But then we meet a character who I'm going to assume is one of, if not KJ's favorite character, and that is the Cheshire Cat. What do you got over there about our friend the Cheshire Cat?
I didn't really take a lot of notes on him.
We have a bow right here.
We do have a bow.
So how does he make you feel? I would
Um,
assume he's your favorite.
he's one of my favorites.
Yep.
He's a little pink and purple cat. Has some stripes. He's a kind of big boy, kind of like
He's
Winston.
a starter.
Kind of like kind of like Winston. Um, he can turn invisible, which gets Alice into trouble later.
Mhm.
But
He's clearly voiced by Winnie the Pooh.
yeah, there was some reference when I was like looking into things, and I guess there was an old phrase that was um grinning like a Cheshire cat. Apparently that was a thing from somewhere in England. So that's why I guess he ended up with his name.
Makes sense.
Because he does obviously smile really big.
Grins, yeah.
But yeah, he is kind of a trouble starter.
Yeah, he's a trouble starter. He tells her which way the rabbit went, which is nice of him. But then tells her to ask the Mad Hatter and the March Hare,
Mm-hmm.
and that he is also mad, because everyone here is mad. So she may have noticed that he isn't all there himself. So she kind of excuses herself from this,
Mm-hmm.
and then she stumbles across the very smoky, teapot-filled unbirthday party, which is what you're asking.
Yeah.
And then, believe it or not, today's my unbirthday.
It's my own birthday too.
It's like they knew that we were recording this video today
On our unbirthday.
on our unbirthdays. So they're celebrating the unbirthday party. We officially meet the Mad Hatter and the March Hare.
And they explain that you can celebrate your unbirthday 364 days a year.
That's right.
I guess unless it's a leap year. If it's a leap year, you can celebrate it 365.
But today is my unbirthday. The Mad Hatter's hat does say 10/6.
Yep.
Which I work with numbers all day. So and then we meet the cute little drunk dormouse in the teapot. I don't know if he's actually drunk, but he acts like he's drunk. Anything
Well,
on that?
I was going back to the Mad Hatter.
Yep, please.
So somewhere in here. So it was supposed to be the cost of his hat.
That's what I
So
thought too. That makes
it would
sense.
have been 10 shillings and 6 pence.
Well,
So
I
that
wonder.
technically was the price ticket
But what I should have done
on his
that I
hat.
normally do is look up how much that would have cost nowadays. But I didn't. Um, so
And the Mad Hatter was also drawn to resemble the guy that was his voice actor.
did you look him up? Because he looks just like him.
I didn't. I just trusted
Yeah.
their
Yeah, he
thing
looks
that
just like him.
if that he was made to be like that,
Yeah.
then it would have. And then the Mad Hatter was actually based on the historical phrase "as mad as a hatter" because of the stuff that they worked with. So mercury was, I guess, a popular item to work on during hat production.
Oh.
And in the 19th century, they used it a lot. And liquid mercury is one of the causes of mercury poisoning, which causes brain damage. And the symptoms are slurred speech, memory loss, tremors, and behavior that can be seen as insane. So that's why he was known as a Mad Hatter.
I mean, he loves tea.
So,
Do
I
you
love tea.
speaking of tea, do you think that the tea from those or those teapots would make you as dizzy as the ride does at Disney?
Hmm.
If you ever see us in the parks, come say hi first, but secondly, follow us to the the Mad Tea Party and just watch how we don't spin at all when we're riding that thing because it's
We did one time. And since then we have not.
yeah.
We did not get sick though, just so you know. We did not.
So
But we spun that thing as fast as we could get it to go, and all we could do was laugh.
so the Alice doesn't know what an unbirthday is. So they all
Yeah.
think that how silly that is that she does not know what an unbirthday is.
Mhm.
But then they discover that kind of like mine, it's also Alice's unbirthday.
Mhm.
So she blows out the candle, and then there's fireworks that explode because, of course, there is. And then the dormouse goes flying up in the air and falls
Mhm.
back into the pot. And then she's trying to tell a story,
Mhm.
but then they keep saying, "Clean cup, move down." And they just kick you down the line.
Mhm.
Kind of like when my friends and I play Uno, which is a reference that only they'll understand, where we just get kicked down the line, have to move our cards. You've played that way.
I hate playing that way.
So again, she's telling a story. They tell her to start at the beginning, and when she gets to the end, stop.
Mhm.
But then as she's telling them the story, she does mention Dinah the cat, which causes the dormouse to freak out and cause a commotion.
Mhm.
And then in the story, something I thought was really cute was the hare only wants a half a cup of tea, so he just takes a knife and he just cuts his cup in half.
Yeah.
But then he comes up with an excellent
But
idea.
then he's able to pour, the Mad Hatter
Yeah.
can pour the tea in there, and then it only fills up half
Half
the
the
cup.
cup. And then he comes up with a very excellent idea to change the subject.
But did you also notice that when the Mad Hatter was listening to Alice tell her story, he was drinking his tea out of the cup and he had his saucer and he
Oh, yeah.
dunked the saucer into the tea and then starts like crunching
Yeah, he's
on. And I was
chewing
just like,
chewing on it. So then
definitely a Mad Hatter.
the hare changes the subject and then bonks the Mad Hatter on the head with a preposterously sized mallet. And then the Mad Hatter then asks the unsolvable riddle.
Hang on. When the cat or the mouse freaked out, they had to put jam on his nose.
Yeah,
I
jam's going to
never
be important in this.
I never understood why they put jam on his nose to calm him
Well,
down.
jam fixes everything. We're about to learn that.
Okay.
We're about to learn that jam fixes everything.
Okay.
Well,
I did not get that when they were first doing it.
No.
I was like, what are they doing?
So then the Mad Hatter asks, "Why is a raven like a writing desk?" What's your thoughts? It's been an unsolvable riddle ever since.
When I was researching something, it was talking about because Edgar Allan Poe wrote both.
Wrote on both.
Wrote on both, yeah.
Maybe.
But I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean that's kind of one of the famous things about the movie is the raven
Maybe.
and the writing desk.
Maybe there is no.
Well, that's what they say is that there is no. So then everybody at the tea party kind of gets nervous because they think that Alice is speaking nonsense, and then we see the Mad Hatter go by, who is of course late. I'm sorry, the White Rabbit goes by. The White Rabbit goes by, who is of course late,
Oh, you forgot my favorite line.
which is
The March Hare says, "If you don't think, you shouldn't talk."
yeah. So they think that yeah, that's a cute line.
Because she said something and she was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't think." And he's like, "If you don't think, you shouldn't talk."
That is cute. Um, so then the White Rabbit goes by, who's late, and the Mad Hatter looks at the White Rabbit's watch and says,
It's 2 weeks behind.
"Of course you're late. It's exactly 2 days
Two-
slow.
2
2
days.
days slow. Imagine if your watch was 2 days slow." Um, and he dunks it into the tea, and then takes out all the wheels and all the springs and replaces them with. Can you name all the things that he replaced them all with?
Butter, jam. That's all I remember.
So yeah,
Butter and jam.
salt.
Oh,
Salt
yeah,
was
he
the
did-
first thing.
He did put a lot of salt in there, yes.
Butter.
Mm-hmm.
Butter. 2 spoons of sugar.
I'm sure.
Jam.
Okay. I do remember the jam.
But
'Cause
no mustard.
I was like, "That's."
Mustard? Don't let's be silly. No mustard.
Did you know that when he actually, that was an ad lib
Really?
or that little part of him saying that?
Don't let's be silly.
And no mustard.
Mhm.
The way he said it, because he like slurred it all together or whatever.
Mustard?
And Walt Disney heard it and he said, "I love that. I want that in there." And they were like, "But there's so much background noise, like we can't." And he's like, "Oh, I don't. That's your problem. Make it happen." And
Well, I mean, it's
they had to like edit it and get it to where it fit, but they did keep it in the movie.
he does say, "Don't let's be silly."
Yeah, so that was actually ad libbed.
That's awesome. So then the watch with all that stuff in it turns into a mad watch. So they smash it, but then the rabbit is upset because, of course,
It was an unbirthday gift.
it was an unbirthday present. So while this
And she wanted to be like, "Let's give him a
Yeah.
Let's go through this birthday."
it's also my unbirthday.
Yeah.
So Alice then wanders away. She wanders into a creepy forest with a bunch of paths and signs she's trying to go straight home. She's over it.
Yeah.
But then in the forest, what's up?
The Mad Hatter and the March Hares, what did it for? She
Yeah.
was ready to be done.
She's over it. In the forest, we see that there's birds made out of eyeglasses, frogs made out of drums and cymbals. Do you think that when we
One
had
of-
frogs
one
in
of
our
the-
pool last year, that it would sound better if they were made out of drums and cymbals?
Maybe. One of the birds was a mirror.
Yep. There was umbrella birds. There was the mirror bird. One of my favorites. There was like an owl that had like an accordion neck, because you know how I love owls in Disney movies.
Mm-hmm.
And Alice says when she gets home, she's gonna write a book about this place.
Mm-hmm.
But she keeps venturing deeper and deeper into the forest. We meet those birdcage birds and accordion necked owls. Nothing makes sense. And then there's a sign that says, "Don't step on the mome raths." What's a mome rath?
I'm assuming it was those colorful little creatures
Yeah.
that pointed the way over.
So they do point the way, but then of course we discover that there's a broom-headed dog that's just erasing the path in front of her, so she doesn't know where to go. Because of course there is.
It also had a broom on its tail.
So then she's singing a song about how she's sad and lost to all the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moon turns into the Cheshire Cat smile. The Cheshire Cat was watching all along. And he tells her that everything is the Queen's way. This is the first time that we hear about the Queen.
Mm-hmm.
And that the Queen would be mad about meeting her, and opens a door to the Queen's kingdom, which is a labyrinth of playing card soldiers, painted roses, because they planted the wrong ones.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel about this before we dive too deep into our friend the Queen?
A gardener just obviously wasn't doing his job because you had one job.
Yep.
to plant red roses and you planted white ones. And even though the roses were painted red, she was still furious. But um she was asking, so Alice asked them why they're painting the roses red, and they were like, um, because we planted white instead, and if the queen sees white instead of red, it would be off with their heads.
Off with their head. And they chose red. Not pink. Not green.
Not
Not
aquamarine.
aquamarine. So then the rabbit runs by and it introduces the Queen of Hearts
Mhm.
and the small little king.
And yeah, and I'm assuming that's what he was late for, was the queen.
Actually, that's a really good point. I did not put. There you go. You just tied that all together. That's awesome. So the queen is obviously mad about the painted roses, and someone is gonna lose their head.
Heads will roll.
Heads will roll. So the cards all start blaming each other. They're like, "It's the tray. It's the tray. The two, the deuce, the deuce." So then it gets blamed on Alice. So they solve it. They decided that they're going to solve this in the most logical way possible, which is
A croquet
a
game.
game of croquet. The balls were made out of. Remember this? What the balls were made out of?
It looked like little like hedgehogs or porcupines.
Moles, I thought maybe.
And no, they didn't really have mole heads. It was
Oh.
like a hedgehog or a
Okay.
crow.
And the mallets were flamingos.
Mhm.
So they had this game.
Different colored ones though.
They had Alice's was not participating. Like it was not playing along at all.
Mhm.
So they play this game of croquet. But while they're playing, the Cheshire Cat appears on the Queen, but only Alice can see him. And of course, if the Queen loses her temper, Alice will lose her head. So then they put her on trial. I think that you might have some notes about the trial.
Yeah, so the king suggests that they put her on trial before they just off with her head. And it's said that he actually probably went around and tried to pardon a lot of people, so a lot of people actually weren't losing their heads. But he suggested that she have a trial instead after the queen got embarrassed, with jam in her face.
Correct.
You didn't reference that.
But
jam in her face. Again, there's another jam face. And then she has a trial, and our dear friend shows up in the jury section, Jose from the Three Caballeros.
Jose Carioca is one of the. I actually missed it. We paused it and went back to try to find it. She does say, "Sentence first, verdict later." Anything else about the trial before we dive?
The queen said that they were. Well, they then started to celebrate the queen's very merry unbirthday.
Yep.
And
Because the March Hare, the Mad Hatter, and the Dormouse were all witnesses. So then they
Yeah.
discovered that, kind of like mine, it's also the Queen's on birthday.
yeah. And then Alice eats a mushroom, grows really tall, and tells the cards that she isn't afraid of them because they're just a pack of cards. And then she calls the queen a fat, pompous, bad-tempered old tyrant.
That's more than the pompous windbag that Cinderella's the king said.
Fat, pompous, bad-tempered old tyrant.
Yep. So she eats the mushroom. She grows really tall, and the queen gets scared of her. The king says that Rule 42 states that all persons over a mile high must leave the court immediately.
And then Alice says, "I'm not a mile high. I'm not going anywhere."
But then, unfortunately, she starts to shrink back down to normal size.
Should have had another mushroom.
On opportune time. So then, of course, it is very much off with her head time.
Yeah.
So then,
slow mushroom running to the door.
Yep.
With the talking doorknob.
So then they chase Alice back through the labyrinth, and we go back through previous scenes and songs of the movie, which is I love it.
All I could think
love it,
about
ties it all
every time
together.
they ran through the labyrinth was that one time that we tried to do a corn maze and I had to pee so bad, and I was like,
Yeah, we didn't make it. It was like a
Run
court maze for
faster,
children who
run
were
faster.
loving it, and we were not having it. So I love that scene. They do go back through like previous scenes of the movie, which I love. So then Alice gets back to the door, and she's from the beginning, but the doorknob says that he is still locked. but he does open his mouth, and then we reveal that Alice is on the other
You
side.
can see herself through
She's
that.
sleeping in the field back from the beginning, in
Underneath
the
the
quote
tree.
unquote normal world. But as she turns around, everyone is still chasing her.
Mhm.
So she's pleading with herself to wake up. Wake up, Alice. Wake up, Alice. She keeps saying, but then her voice turns back into the school teacher's voice,
Mhm.
trying to wake Alice up in the normal land, and she wakes up. So the Wonderland dream is over,
Mhm.
and the teacher is asking her to kindly recite her lesson. But then Alice springs awake, but instead of her giving the lesson, she quotes the rhyme that the crocodile about the crocodile that the caterpillar told her earlier.
Mhm.
And the school teacher is very confused, has no idea what Alice is saying, but tells her it's time for tea, because of course it is time for tea, as the school day is over.
Mhm.
And then we hear the Alice in Wonderland song as the film ends and the credits start to roll.
All I could think was this entire movie, she's not been awake.
Mhm.
She's been asleep and not paying attention to her lessons the
Well, her
entire
dreams,
movie. None of this
her dreams made a great movie. There's songs written about this.
yeah.
I've watched it many times in my
For some
life.
reason, I don't know if maybe it was a play I saw of it. Um, I thought that Alice had fallen and hit her head
Yeah.
and was out. And
I mean, there's also
when
like
she finds her,
there's sequels and stuff
yeah,
that
and
are
when
made.
she finds her at the end of the movie and she was trying to wake her up, I thought she was trying to wake her up because she had like
No, she was
fell and hit her head.
sleeping.
But yeah, so
So then the credits roll. If you haven't noticed already, I love this movie. I've always loved this movie. It's a shot in the arm of nostalgia, but I still love it. I still watch it. When we played it the other day, KJ was shocked because it was already like halfway through from the previous time I had watched it. I love like the lyrical rhyming aspect of this. I love the animation. Um, I've never done any hallucinogenic drugs in my life, but honestly, I still love this movie. I know that people kind of compare it to that.
that he knows of.
Yeah, I don't know. But I love it. So let's throw it over to some ratings and thoughts, my friend over here.
So I gave it an 8 out of 10.
I would have given it a 10 out of 10.
Well, that's you.
It's true. What did IMDb give it? A 6.7.
7.3.
Ooh, that's right. Ahead of the curve.
7.3.
So I know that our Princess Pup Faye kind of messed up our list upon a star earlier, but I think we're ready to do that. So let me ask you the question. Here in 1951, does our friend Alice that we just talked about for way longer than any other episode make the list upon a star?
She does.
Okay.
So I am going to
A little bit of rearranging.
put this down. Let's see. How many of these can I move at one time? Not very many, apparently.
Ooh. So, AJ, can you read us aloud? Can you recite, like from the movie, your list upon a star?
So I'm going to start it off with Dumbo, The Three Caballeros, Alice in Wonderland, Fantasia, Saludos Amigos, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and Cinderella, followed by Melody Time.
Nice. Actually, I believe. Oh, yeah, you're right. That's your 10. So I am going to do a little bit of rearranging here. And I have some rearranging to do a little bit. So my list upon a star top 10 is firmly number 1, Alice in Wonderland, coming in hot. Followed by Pinocchio, followed by The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, followed by Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, followed by The Three Caballeros, then Cinderella, then Dumbo, then Bambi, then Fun and Fancy Free, and then the Saludos Amigos. So, what a great film. It jumped up on both of our lists. Um, I would love to hear your thoughts on this film. I would love to hear your thoughts on some of the questions we asked. But the biggest question is the movie that we're going to watch next week from 1952 going to be so highly regarded on our lists?
You'll have to come back and find out.
So that film is the 19th film and something completely different, and that is the story of Robin Hood and his merry men. That is not the animated version from the 70s. That is a live action film called The Story of Robin Hood and His Merry Men.
Mhm.
And that will be our next film. Thank you for watching. Thank you for deep diving everything with us. Thank you for listening to me talk 8 pages worth of notes on this. And again, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify, the TikTok queen over here. Thanks for hanging out with our pup. Pup was here. But again, send us an email, deepdiveinthemagicpod@gmail.com. I'm kind of rambling because I love this movie. But again, we'll see you later.
Yeah. Thanks for deep diving magic. Bye.